My fingers are burning, man.
Yeah, you've been typing a lot today. It's been a busy, busy day. Good thing I spent all that time yesterday working on this show sheet, right? Meticulously gathering all the news and rumors and everything, and then just, thrown out the window today. We expect some of these dominoes to fall, but has there been a
Yeah.
crazier day one of free agency than today?
I want to say we always say that every year, like everything is the craziest ever. But this does seem like somewhere on Park Avenue, they're going, wait a minute, we need to stretch this out over a couple of days. We got a lot of programming to film.
Seriously, free agency hasn't even opened yet. This is just the legal tampering period, and it feels like just about every domino has fallen. So we got a ton to get into. Let's go ahead and start the show. Thank you for tuning into the Football Guys Fantasy Football Show. Alfredo Brown is on assignment today, so we are joined by the legendary, but also the new guy, Bob Harris. Bob, is this your first appearance on Football Guys since you've officially joined the staff? I believe so, right?
I think this is it. I think this is my super debut, and I couldn't be in better hands than Dave Kluge's. That's what I'm told.
That being said, you have been on the launch pad with me. You are a regular on the couch. I've been on there with Sig many, many times. So certainly not a newcomer to the Football Guys channels or a newcomer to Football Guys, but we like to have fun with the new guy. Anyway, let's dive into it, man. We have so much to talk about. As I kind of joked around earlier, I prepped a show sheet and I thought that we would have like, where's Kirk Couisins going to sign? Where's Baker Mayfield going to sign? What's going to happen with Michael Pittman after this year? But turns out pretty much every domino has fallen already. We have a ton to discuss today, and let's start off with probably the biggest news. Kirk Couisins signed to deal with the Atlanta Falcons. Well, again, none of this is official. None of this will be official until Wednesday, but what we're hearing is a 4-year, $180 million with $100 million guaranteed. I think the question everybody has, Drake London, Kyle Pitts, are they coming to life? Are we finally going to see it all happen? Is this the new Justin Jefferson? Is this the new TJ Hawkinson? Or are we tempering expectations?
Did we bury the lead here? Jonnu Smith is gone. So, yes, of course. Heads off to Miami. So, of course, it's Kyle Pitts season. Like, at some point, I mean, Kyle Pitts, the talent has been there. You know, the workload we've seen at times. But, like, you know, all the analytics guys will roll out all the analytical numbers and tell you why he is still – should be relevant and should be on your fantasy radar. And I think based on the talent and the dearth thereof more widely at the position, that, yeah, he should be a guy that maybe you're looking to hit on as a value. Kirk Couisins has had great success throwing to a number of players. A number of them have been tight ends. So I think I think he's a fair gamble at this point. Like, you know, if you're out there playing in best balls or whatever early in drafts, I mean, you'll find him going at inside the top 10, but at a fairly reasonable price. And I'm not against that. Drake London's the one I'm interested in. I want to see him finally make good on his value. But I mean, when was the last time we've seen a team, Dave, with, you know, that much talent at each of the skill positions, not called quarterback, and been unable to make use of them? And it just seems like with the incoming staff, I have a lot of hope for Zach Robinson. You know, like, could we see a Kyron Williams type usage for Bijan Robinson, please? I mean, I think that's not outside the realm of possibility. And I think both of those receiving assets coming to the fore. If Kirk Couisins is locked in and ready to roll, that looks like everything is going smooth with his recovery from the torn Achilles tendon. Remember, he was quarterback 4 through 8 weeks last season. So optimism is understandable.
He's a month ago. So right. I mean, the recovery seems like it's going well.
Right. And the video's out there on your X machine, people. You can go out and look at it. He's out on the pickleball courts throwing balls around. So it looks like he's there.
And you talk about burying the lead. Also, Arthur Smith is gone. So we might finally see that better usage for Bijan Robinson, where we're not going to be watching Tyler Algier getting 18 touches a game and stealing all the goal line work. I don't think you can help but be excited. Like you said, you know, some of the metrics for Kyle Pitts, I've talked about this a lot so far on this show. Led all tight ends in air yard share last year and had less than 60% of his catches were deemed, or his pass attempts were deemed catchable. So dealing with just, this is what we know, but the numbers back it up. Yeah, he was getting open. He was drawing targets. He just wasn't drawing quality targets. And now we hope that kind of changes a little bit, not to mention a year removed from the knee injury now. So we should see him closer to the player that we saw when he went for 1,000 yards in his rookie season. I mean, how high are we pushing him? Like top 6 tight end? Are we going right back to the well, or do you think it's going to be maybe a little bit more pessimistic from fantasy drafters?
I'm old and mean and cheap, so I want a bargain. And when he's not a bargain, I'll quit playing on him. But like, if you're out there drafting in early best balls right now, you're seeing him as like tight end 9. You know, maybe you get him as 10. Could he jump up ahead of, let's say, Evan Ingram? Now with the news we'll talk about today, Gabe Davis showing up. I mean, I guess if that whole receiving core is healthy, Gabe Davis isn't a difference maker in that regard. But if that whole receiving core is healthy all year, do you think Evan Ingram gets the 114 targets he got last year? No. Brock Bowers, a little bit of a risk. George Kittle, up and down. All the guys ahead of him, Dalton Kincaid. I could make arguments for why I might like Kyle Pitts better. I could make easy arguments for why I like him better at his price. And so if the price doesn't rise much, I'll have way more Kyle Pitts than I'll have of any of those other guys.
So again, we're really peeling back the layers on this Kirk Cousins discussion because I think this is probably the biggest news of the day. But I'm going to throw it out there. Alfredo Brown, right before he hopped on his plane and unplugged for a couple of hours, he tweeted out a poll. Who would you prefer in Dynasty? And he had 4 players on there, but the 2 that jumped out to me, Garrett Wilson and Drake London. Are we getting that excited? Because I saw a lot of people were voting for Drake London ahead of Garrett Wilson. We're not there yet, are we?
I'm not there yet, but like look, Drake London was my number 1 receiver of his rookie class, right? And I mean, there's a reason for it. Hell of a player, great size, great ability, contested catch ability as well. So like, there's a lot to like. We just haven't seen it. So the recency bias has me dialed back a little bit. Garrett Wilson, you know, you're assuming with Aaron Rodgers, he's going to get peppered with the targets. Look, if Drake London gets those 100+ targets or, you know, up in that 130, 140 target range, we would all be very excited. And perhaps we'll be telling a different story about him next year.
Yeah, and we are going live today, Bob, which we don't do often, but with news rolling in like crazy, I just want to tell the chat to relax a little bit. I see Aaron Jones to Houston and had to fact check that. That is not true. Aaron Jones did not sign with Houston.
Easy, kids.
We will be checking. Yeah, we'll be checking. I've got a Twitter open in another tab, and I've got my notifications.
We see lots of wish casting. Lots of wish casting. And look, I've been doing it too, though. You know, we sit here and we talk about these teams, whether it's on you know, the live streams, whether it's on the podcast or on the SiriusXM Fantasy Show. I try to speak these things into existence all the time. So get on with your bad selves on that regard. Let's just keep it in check.
Yeah, T-Bone, just having fun, not giving you a hard time by any means, just laughing here a little bit. So let's go on. We've got more quarterback news. Russell Wilson was released. By the time I was putting the show sheet together yesterday, the question was going to be, where do we think he signs? Well, we got news last night that he signed with the Pittsburgh Steelers on a $1.2 million salary. Seems like he's kind of sticking to Denver here and making it pay for his salary, but you know, the immediately people are getting excited about Russell Wilson, saying it's an upgrade. I think this is one of those where we need to pump the brakes. I am of the belief that Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett in a vacuum. But we're also looking at Arthur Smith's offense here, where they has to throw across the middle of the field quite a bit. You know, it's a lot of timing routes, and we know Russ, the problems that he had in Denver were going off script and doing things of that nature that Sean Payton didn't like. I could see similar issues with the fit here in Pittsburgh. So I guess throwing the question to you, I think you're probably of the belief with me that Russell Wilson is a better quarterback than Kenny Pickett, but are we sure Russ is even going to be the week 1 starter?
No, we're entirely not sure. By the way, Devin Singletary to the Giants as we were speaking.
Ooh, all right.
Saquon Barkley sized hole to fill there. We'll see if the man they call Motor can pull that off. So like, I do think there are some things Russell Wilson, if they set this up right for him, they have the personnel to do it in the backfield, especially if they can set him up with some play action passing and George Pickens is like the ideal. Like, could you see him handling a Cortland Sutton like 10 touchdown season, like the contested catch guy down the field who gets super angry at Russ like at least 3 times a game, but also maybe scores once or twice. Like, I think this is, a lot of people are going to be looking at this as an opportunity for Pickens to truly break out. And I think that is in the range of possible outcomes. He's reasonably priced, and I think the upside is there for him to, you know, to outperform his current ADP.
Now, we're bouncing all over the show sheet today. We were going to talk about rumors at the very end of the show, but since we're on the topic of the Pittsburgh Steelers, one of the rumors that's been floating around right now is that they might be trading Diontae Johnson. Are you putting any faith into that? Do you think they trade Diontae Johnson, or do you think he and Pickens are both here to stay?
You know, I wonder if they can get good return. I mean, like, I don't see why they would do it if they're not getting good return. And I don't know if anyone's going to be paying up to land. And the talk has been Arizona has like been the team that's most linked to him, and that seems like a little odd as well. And I mean, Marquise Brown is a free agent, could be moving on, but we're thinking they're going to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. with the 4th pick overall. I'd like to see him stick around. I think he's still a really good player, makes a good compliment to Pickens. You know, they do different things. I think it works out well, and maybe Russ can maximize the value of both of them.
I mean, can I make the comparison, say George Pickens and Diontae Johnson, kind of similar to DK Metcalf and Tyler Lockett and the roles that they
Yeah,
play? I mean, it
I think
makes a
that's
little bit of
fair.
sense, right? We can draw that comparison. Let's move on though. Talk about Baker Mayfield. Really happy to see this. I think he deserved this contract, 3 years, 100 million with 50 million guaranteed. So he is going to be the quarterback for the Bucks at least for the next few years here. I think the question a lot of people have is, did he kind of peak last year? I mean, we saw Baker playing some of the best football of his career. Do you think this is just a sign of things to come? Do you think that he found a good scheme fit? Or do you expect maybe some regression as we head into 2024?
I expect some regression, but maybe not a ton. Like it was career best across the board, yardage, touchdowns. I mean, he looked super good. And there's a change in coordinator. The good news is, I mean, it seemed like the switch got flipped when he went to Los Angeles. Whether it was him studying that offense on his iPad on the flight
that
there,
Thursday night game where he looks like a Hall of Famer, yeah,
jumping in. But they bring Liam Cohen in, who was the play caller in Los, or not the play caller, but the coordinator in Los Angeles that year. And then he moved on to Kentucky this past season. But he comes in, and that seems to be a Baker approved pick. I think this is I think my expectations are reasonably high. I think he's a great value at where he's currently going. I think Mike Evans is probably a great value where he's currently going in drafts. And I think the price for both of them will rise. Look, there's going to be, if you're out there running through the best ball mean streets with me right now, a lot of prices are going to shift on the news we're hearing today. Probably more than they should. They'll, that'll even out in time. But if you're sitting there and you're making a pick and something happens right before you make that pick, you're likely to react to these moves in real time. And it's kind of one of the fun parts about drafting this time of year is you can do that and take some chances and see how it ends up. And I, for me, I think the offense is similar enough. Baker has a good comfort level in it. Mike Evans and he, they wanted to work together. This just seems like the move that had to happen. Good news for Rachaad White likely as well. So I like the whole package here.
Yeah, and you already talked about it a little bit. Mike Evans, there were concerns about whether he was going to hit free agency. The Bucks quelled that immediately. They gave him a 2-year extension worth up to $52 million over the next 2 years with $35 million guaranteed. So they didn't really shy away from paying him. He got some big bucks here. That's going to keep him in Tampa Bay through age 33. I don't really have too much to discuss about this. We know what Mike Evans is at this point. He is a bargain every single year in fantasy drafts, and he is just a 1,000-yard machine. I'll just ask you, this would be, I believe, year 12 dating back to college in a row if he can do it. Just quick yes or no, Bob. Does Mike Evans hit 1,000 yards this year?
They will do everything they can to make it happen. And if I'm betting on it, yes.
And you would be a fool to bet against it at this point. Now let's go ahead and talk about these running backs because, my goodness, this is really where we're seeing a lot of movement today. And I'm going to say a lot of the running back movement that we're seeing today is a testament to this incoming rookie class. There have been a lot of talks about how this is a very weak rookie class and a very loaded veteran free agency class. And if anything about the first couple hours of free agency today if we can take anything away from that, it's that probably is true, because in years past, we've seen guys like Leonard Fournette, getting signed mid-season, and these names that we expect to fall day one of free agency, not getting signed until summer camp. And here we are now. Basically, every big name has been signed already. The biggest one that we're going to talk about, Saquon Barkley with the Eagles, 3 years, $38 million with $26 million guaranteed.
That's a real money. Contract. This is real money, right? And like, we didn't expect that. And I think you're exactly correct on this. This is the reason for it. The draft class is shallow and very shallow. I don't know. Past Trey Benson, is there anyone we like? That's Jonathan Brooks.
We'll trick ourselves into liking somebody,
right? We will for sure, depending on the landing spot. But as I look at the money for some of these guys, I mean, I think this is like guys last year would have loved to get this money. So Austin Eckler said, openly. So yeah, I do think it. I think like the Barkley to the Eagles is going to be super exciting for people. I love it when they're moved within the division. Within their division is great, and that money tells you they're going to give them a big role. And obviously moved on from DeAndre Swift. Your brief momentary shares of Kenneth Gainwell, you dynasty managers. It was great. I loved it too. And it's over.
So I guess the big question with Saquon Barkley, obviously, I mean, I think the fun thing to talk about here is just that he stays in the NFC East. You got to wonder if there was some bad blood between maybe Saquon Barkley, the Eagles, the Giants, how that kind of bled into this transaction. I don't know if you saw, but Saquon immediately went to Twitter and started tweeted out Eagles emojis, which is just, a lot of Giants fans aren't feeling too good about that. But let's talk fantasy perspective here really quickly, because I think that's what everybody wants to know. Maybe I'm crazy. I don't think this is really a great landing spot. And of course, it's Saquon Barkley. He's talented, but we've seen waning efficiency for a couple of years now, whether that's the injuries, the age, the usage catching up to him. But we have also seen in Philadelphia that there aren't a lot of checkdowns to running backs, and we know targets are much more valuable than carries. We also know that when they get near the goal line, it's going to be the tush push. They're not going to put the ball in Saquon's belly. So how excited are we getting about Saquon Barkley? It's tough for me to look at him as anything more than like a middling RB2 in this offense.
I think an RB2 for sure, but I mean, they have thrown the ball. Like the total targets for running backs have been reasonably good. They just spread them out a little bit too much. Hopefully that won't be the case when they're spending this kind of money on Barkley. But I agree. I think the role would have been more robust in other places. My favorite wish casting location was Houston. I would have taken that, but like I would have taken the Giants as well. So just, this is interesting. And I think that's going to be the concern. And maybe that knocks the price down low enough though, to where I start viewing him as a value, right? Because there is like a hole in the running back. It seems once you get past that top 4 or 5 guys, and Barkley's kind of been the cutoff. When you get down around that range, you're going, I'll just wait a while and draft more receivers. Maybe at this point there'll be a running back in that hole if the price dips far enough, and it might well, based on everything you said is 100% true, and Barkley will have to be, he'll have to be different than what we've seen there for him to return value at that price.
And, we did see Miles Sanders score double-digit touchdowns just a couple of years ago. DeAndre Swift, he got pretty involved in the passing game after Jalen Hurts was injured, tweaked his knee, and couldn't run quite as much. So there have been a few outs that we've seen over the last couple of years where running backs have paid off in fantasy.
Well, you think about, Sanders' rookie year. I mean, he was the best receiver on the team, but only because of injuries, right? He had 50 catches. He was the most dangerous playmaking threat in that offense, and that included the downfield portion. But ideally, I think they would rather look. You have AJ Brown, you have Devontae Smith, you have Dallas Goedert, and other receivers who are not bad. Some of those ancillary receivers that can jump in the mix as well. So, I mean, it is interesting. I hope we see maybe Barkley change that paradigm a little bit, but that shouldn't be where you set your plant your flag. That yes, this is where they turn things around, and the running back becomes a primary receiving asset.
Yeah, and I think this is one of those things, we hear it all the time. I think this is a better real life move than it is a fantasy move. I think that it's good for the Eagles offense. They've really needed that guy that could be a big threat. And we saw the offense look a little bit better pre-Jalen Hurts injury when DeAndre Swift was running well. And they looked like an unstoppable offense for a few weeks there. So now with a presumably healthier Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley in the backfield, that's a threat that they've needed for a little while. So we'll see how this all works out. We'll see where the ADP lands for Saquon Barkley, but assuming he creeps into round 2, I think I'm going to be out at that cost. But again, a lot of free agency left. We'll see what goes. Now, here's a guy that I am excited about. Josh Jacobs signing with the Packers. We saw the Packers last year, really surprisingly good offense with Jordan Love. And speaking of surprising, I didn't have this anywhere near my radar. I didn't think that they were going to be in the running for a running back. Aaron Jones looked like he was on a tear at the end of last season, and I thought they were going to run it back with him. And now all of a sudden, we haven't gotten the dollar amount yet, but Josh Jacobs signed to a 3-year deal, and then they released Aaron Jones. They're eating $12 million in dead cap this year to let Aaron Jones walk. I don't even know where to start with this, Bob. Try to make some sense of this and let me know what's going on, because this is just a shocking and confusing move to me.
Unless you look at this as Matt LaFleur has desired, I think since his time there, and we go back to the Aaron Rodgers time, I think his desired plan of attack has always been to lean more heavily on the run as we get into the colder portion of the season. It makes perfect sense, and we've seen him do it at times. AJ Dillon had brief times where you it looks like he could be a thing. Never turned into a thing, so they move on from him. Now they get a guy who we know is a thing, a guy who has just been a brute between the tackles. I think NFL.com had some numbers up on him. I think he's got since 2019, he led the NFL with 2,791 rushing yards between the tackles. And he's not a bad receiver, right? He also has one of 4 players with 50 plus rushing yards per game, 20 plus receiving yards per game in each of the last 3 seasons. He joins Christian McCaffrey,
45 plus
Aaron
targets.
Jones.
45 plus targets in 4 of his last 5 years. I mean, I think that's the most underrated thing about his game, is that he's very good at catching the ball as well.
Right, but I just think moving him into a true featured role, I know on Football Guys, the current ranking is 20. That's going to rise almost immediately. Also, his ADP right now, I think on Underdog is right around 14, running back 14. That's going to rise. He moves Josh Jacobs with a true featured role in a competent offense with a decent quarterback, he jumps right up into running back one territory.
And that was my question. You're going to say running back one. And by running back one, you mean a top 12 running
Top 12.
back. I want to say, am I crazy for thinking that he's top 5? I mean, when you
No,
start
not
looking
crazy at
at
all.
the running
Absolutely
backs
not.
right now, Christian McCaffrey, Breece Hall, Bijan Robinson, those guys are probably in a tier by themselves.
Byron
But
Williams kind of comes, you feel like a
Jahmyr
little
Gibbs,
bit
Jonathan
uncomfortable.
Taylor.
Right. All those guys you have like, I like them, but so yeah, him moving into that territory is perfectly reasonable.
Yeah, he's going to see a ton of volume on a good offense. He's going to catch passes. He's going to score touchdowns. All the things we were just saying that we're a little bit concerned about Saquon Barkley not getting in Philadelphia. Josh Jacobs is going to get all of that in Green Bay. So love this signing for his fantasy value. Like you said, right now he's outside of the top 12 in ADP. I'd expect to see him creep up into that 5, 6, 7 range. I think he jumps.
If by creep you mean rocket.
Yeah.
Strap the ADP rocket to his tail side and look out.
Yeah, so he should have a pretty good 2024 season here. Now, here's one of the most intriguing, and this was the first news story that we got of the day. 14 minutes after legal tampering began, DeAndre Swift signed with the Chicago Bears. 3 years, $24 million with $15.8 million guaranteed. I think that's a great deal for Chicago, especially given the lack of usage that we've seen. DeAndre Swift was kind of held on a short leash during his days in Detroit. Didn't see a ton of usage in Philadelphia, even though it was a bump up. And he's still just 25 years old, like recently turned 25 years old. So he's still got a lot of tread on those tires. They're going to have him in Chicago through age 28. I think the obvious question here, or maybe presumption, is that he's going to be the RB1. Like there's no way Khalil Herbert or Roschon Johnson are getting ahead of DeAndre Swift, right?
$8 million a year is lead back money. I mean, lead back money, even if you're not in the committee. And let's say they do keep a committee to some degree. Expecting Swift to be the dominant force in there should be where you're at, right? I mean, they didn't bring him in to be a 3-man rotation, and we'll see. Roschon, a decent receiving back, but DeAndre Swift, that's kind of where he made his fame as a reasonable receiver. So last year, I think he did himself a big favor by staying healthy, right? DeAndre Swift, and
that was the question.
Yeah, right. That's always been the knock on him, is he can't stay healthy, and Dave, I'm injury agnostic. Everybody gets hurt. He seemed to get hurt more than others. And I know there are people out there who will tell me hurt players stay hurt. Well, he didn't stay hurt last year, right? So I kind of like this one. Again, we have another branch of the Rams, the McVay coaching tree here. Shane Waldron coming in as offensive coordinator. And kind of like the way the Rams use their running backs. I'm not going to lie. It works out pretty well. Whoever it is. I mean, we can go back, Kyron Williams was phenomenal. We can go back to last year when the guy they didn't even like, Cam Akers, was down the stretch, like running back 4 for 2 or something. It was right at the top of the ranks.
Let's look last year too. They had in Seattle, Shane Waldron, he had Zach Charbonnet, who they spent premium draft capital on and was supposed to be a very good running back. And they were still leaning heavily on Ken Walker. So that's a big change. And then, on the other side of the coin, you look at Luke Getsy, who was the offensive coordinator last year, running this frustrating 3-headed committee who we never knew who the running back was going to be on any given week. Luke Getsy is the same guy for years when we were saying, free Aaron Jones, why is Jamal Williams getting all these touches? So huge shift in offensive philosophy, and I think how they plan to utilize this backfield. I don't think we're going to see this rotation anymore. I think it's going to be the DeAndre Swift show in Chicago for the most part.
I think so too. And by the way, another move, Gus Edwards goes from one Harbaugh to the other.
All right. So I think that puts them out of consideration because there were rumors that they were hoping to get Saquon Barkley. They were one of the 3 teams that was tied to Saquon Barkley. There were rumors about Derrick Henry. I think bringing in Gus Edwards is a good secondary back, but I think that still leaves them in a position where we've been talking about on this show for months now to potentially draft Blake Corum or maybe one of these other running backs. You think that's probably what Harbaugh is going to want to do. I don't expect them to make Gus Edwards the guy in Los Angeles, right?
Totally. And like, I was hoping again for a higher end player, but does this open the door for Austin Eckler to remain a Charger at the right price?
We'll see. We'll talk about Austin Eckler in a little bit. Let's talk about the guys that are signed right now, and then we'll talk about the guys that are still hanging out there for now. The other big signing today, Tony Pollard signs with the Titans. This one, talk about killing 2 birds with 1 stone, man. Fantasy community, we love Tony Pollard. We love Tyjae Spears, and I'm afraid that this just kneecaps both of them? Am I overreacting here, Bob, or is that kind of where your head's at too?
Biggest concern right here is what are they going to do about that offensive line? I mean, the first thing they did, bringing in Bill Callahan, the new head coach, Brian Callahan's dad, Bill Callahan, one of the best offensive line coaches in football. Also, he'll need some offensive linemen based on what we saw last year. They need some help there. And so that's a little bit of a concern for me. I wonder, there's a handful of players where I wonder how much we maybe underplayed or overlooked injury concerns, or, the recovery from injury in Pollard's case, coming off the broken fibula from the year before. And I mean, I would say the same for maybe Austin Eckler, maybe the same, maybe for Travis Kelce. Do we know how healthy these guys were throughout the course of the year? Pollard at least said something about it, and we saw down the stretch he started to gain a little steam. So I think, I have questions about how much of that was Pollard's health, how much of it was how he was used. We can remember the previous regime in Dallas, the coaching staff felt like he was best, not with 30 touches, but 30 snaps a game, right? Mm-hmm. And maybe they were closer to correct, and maybe that's something we can see in Tennessee. I have some shares of Tony Pollard. I think picked him up in the 5th or 6th round in the hopes that he might get a more prominent role somewhere. Got auto picked in a couple drafts with him, but those auto picks made me convinced that hey, maybe this isn't that bad, right? Yeah. As I looked at how the teams ended up being built, I felt like it maybe wasn't so bad. So I like the offense that Brian Callahan will install. I don't know that they have the personnel to get off the ground this year. And one of the concerns last year, I've talked about this before. Michael Gelkin from the Dallas Morning News, talked last year, did a study, and how many times the percentage of carries that Tony Pollard was hitting his top speed or hitting his high end speed over 19 miles an hour. And it was down from 4% of his runs down below 2%. And you wonder how much of that was a function of play calling or his health. Maybe we'll find out in Tennessee.
Well, I think Tony Pollard is the better of the two between him and Tyjae Spears. And I think that there's, everybody soured on Tony Pollard last year. One, because of the injury that really got him off to a slow start to start the year. And two, because of just unlucky touchdowns. I mean, that's really what it came down to. How many times did we see Tony Pollard go down at the 1 yard line? If he just punched half of those touchdowns in, as opposed to going down at the 1 yard line, we'd have a completely different conception on who Tony Pollard is. So I like Tony Pollard. I think he's still got a lot left in the tank. He's about to turn 27, but like DeAndre Swift, who we were talking about earlier, doesn't have a ton of usage. So he still has some tread on the tires. So, I think I know the answer to this, but let me just ask you right now, if you have a take, do you prefer Tony Pollard or Tyjae Spears going into the 2024 season?
I feel more comfortable with Pollard. I've seen more from him. And I know, I'm not a draftnik guy. I'm not out there watching tons of college tape. And I know he, like a lot of people thought he was a thing coming in. I just haven't seen it yet at the pro level. Maybe we will. I'm just more familiar and more comfortable with Pollard. So I'll have more of him. Doesn't mean I won't get some Spears, especially if the price drops, and I suspect it will.
Yeah, I think the confusing thing here is last year it was very obvious that they were doing kind of a thunder and lightning approach where Derrick Henry was that hammer, and then they had Tyjae Spears catching the ball, getting out in space, being the little jitterbug in the open field. And Tony Pollard does a lot of those same things where he is an open field runner. He's better when he gets outside. He can run between the tackles, probably a little bit better than Tyjae Spears does. But I think that's what kind of confuses me a little bit about this Tony Pollard signing. If they brought somebody in, I would have thought maybe like a Gus Edwards, who we just talked about, went to the Chargers. That makes more sense. We see a lot of overlapping characteristics and overlapping play style between Tyjae Spears and Tony Pollard.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting too, because Rand Carthon was really, complimentary of Spears. He was made of the right stuff, and except he was way more earthy about it than I was. And so, I mean, I just, it felt like this was his time, and now I feel less like it's his time. And I feel a little better about that because I've just never been in on him, and now I have a more reason not to be. Now I have an excuse built in, so I don't feel like I'm just like a total hater.
Well, I'm going to say if you're in Dynasty and you're looking to go out and buy Tyjae Spears, today's a great day to do so. Or throw out some third-round pick. See if you can get a third-round pick for Tyjae Spears, at least worth it at that cost. Bob, we're halfway into the show, and we are still just talking about running backs here. There are so many running backs on the move today. We already talked about Gus Edwards a little bit signing with the Chargers, so we won't stick on that any longer. Antonio Gibson with the Patriots. I mean, I guess we've got to talk about it.
No, he got a guaranteed contract, I think, didn't he? Did I see that floating by?
Yeah, I mean, yeah.
Oh, damn. I have been reaping some shares of Ramondre Stevenson in recent drafts. I'm not feeling as great about that. We'll see. Alex Van Pelt, coming from Cleveland, run heavy offenses that they ran there. I feel like that Cleveland offense has always been run heavy, not because they wanted it to be. I think the Cleveland offense that Kevin Stefanski wanted to run looked more like what we saw with Joe Flacco late last season. It's just he's never had a quarterback that could do it in Cleveland or get it done at that level. And maybe we'll see if Deshaun Watson can do that. But you wonder if that mentality, that run heavy because we don't have a quarterback mentality, is going to go along with Alex Van Pelt to New England. And it would make sense until we get the quarterback situation sorted out. That's always the other part of that is the Patriots, the long history of, relying on multiple backs. One is more of a receiver. I was hopeful that maybe
let me just stop you for a quick second. I mean, that's kind of where my head is at, right? Like Mayo was kind of groomed by Belichick, and we just automatically assume that this team is going to have the same DNA and the same tendencies that they had for years and years and years with Belichick. But what if they don't? What if this is suddenly a new team without Belichick there, without Brady there, and we don't see these hyper specialized roles for running backs anymore? I'm just talking out of the side of my mouth here. I mean, I don't really know, but it's been the same thing for so long.
I feel the same. What if they, draft Jaden Daniels as their quarterback and, take a whole different direction from the kind of things we've seen? The Patriot way is a totally new way, and it's entirely possible. So yeah, I'm wide open to all these possibilities. Would have liked to seen Antonio Gibson land in a place where maybe he got more of the role. We've seen him at times. We've seen the flashes of him. Think back to that game against Dallas, like a huge outing where we saw, the
game against Buffalo with the 80-yard touchdown catch and run. Yeah.
Right. So would have liked to see more of him. I don't feel confident that we will at the moment.
I just hope that we finally see him utilized to his skill set. I mean, we know that he was a college wide receiver, and we know that he can catch the ball, and he just never really got that full workload as a pass catcher in Washington. So hopefully now they can find him in a role, whether it's running out of the slot more or maybe running in dual backfields with Ramondre Stevenson. Just want to see him unleashed. Like, we know this guy can catch the ball, and very rarely was he asked to do that in Washington. The last running back signing to talk about here, kind of broke it earlier on the show, but let's peel it back a little bit. Devin Singletary to the Giants. Man, you got to help. You can't help but feel for Giants fans right now, right? Like they're likely trotting out Daniel Jones, even though the rumor all around Combine Week was that the team has lost faith in Daniel Jones. Then they lose Saquon Barkley to a division opponent and bring in Devin Singletary, who, don't get me wrong, Devin Singletary looked okay last year, but I think a lot of that had to do with the scheme and the run blocking that he was allotted in Houston. Right. Devin Singletary, just to put it bluntly, cannot do the things that Saquon Barkley was able to do in New York. This is going to be tough.
No, not at all. And again, another team where the offensive line is a huge factor. I will not. Look, I didn't have a lot of shares of Houston running backs last year. Where I had more Singletary because he was a cheaper piece. I don't know if I see a cheaper piece in New York that I can have more shares of, so I might end up with some Singletary. The price will probably not be, I think the things we're talking about will depress the price or at least keep it way reasonable. So I may end up with some shares just on the hope that he ends up with a prominent workload. But I mean, they have so many other needs. I mean, I can't imagine them investing heavily in the draft there either. It seems like they'll, quarterback, and they still need that alpha wide receiver, right? I mean, they've been swinging and missing.
It would be Darren Waller, right?
Yeah, right. I feel like that was the microaggression against me.
Oh no, Darren Waller was my tight end too last year. I was all in myself. I think we all got duped on that one. Yeah, it's going to be tough to get a read on this team. I think this is one of those backfields where I'm not going to feel comfortable paying up for Devin Singletary. Right. I'd rather just wait until the 18th round of my draft and draft Eric Gray and hope that maybe he can become something rather than putting, the way it looks right now, unless they can make some huge blockbuster trade and pull off something crazy that I'm not even thinking about right now. The Giants aren't an offense that I'm going to be too excited about going into next year.
Honestly, not like, and I'm like a big proponent of hey, even the worst offenses, there are some players there. There are some, like I'm keen on volume, Dave. Like, that.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm like, in a volatile NFL, like in week game, a league where the Giants could beat anyone any given week and you don't know what's going to happen. If I found somebody with reliable volume there, I might be okay with it, but I'm not too excited at the moment.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel. So we made it through the running backs, a lot of them, and there still are a few left to fall, not many, but let me just look at this real quickly. Here are some of the guys that are still hanging out there. Well, first of all, I want to say Bill Barnwell talked about some potential cap casualties as Alvin Kamara, Nick Chubb, Joe Mixon, so we'll see if they get cut. He also had Aaron Jones lumped in there, which we just saw released. The other names to fall, it got really thin, really fast. A.J. Dillon, Zach Moss, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, J.K. Dobbins. Are there any landing spots that could excite you with these guys? I mean, the one right now is that Houston, who we know turned Devin Singletary from a nobody into a somebody last year. That's where we'd probably like to see somebody land. But are there any other landing spots? Miami,
Dallas,
maybe?
Dallas.
Dallas?
I feel like Miami is probably like. I think like they've got a cheap group that gives them a lot of upside. I don't see them going after a big name anyway. Like, could I see, Philadelphia's made the big move. Las Vegas, are they happy with Zamir White? Happy with what they have there?
Oh,
I
my
hope
Dynasty shares hope so, because I got a lot of Zamir White.
I hope the same. So, I mean, that's, that seems like a possibility. The Chargers, are they done? Is Gus enough? I mean, it seems like unlikely they'll go after a big name. So I guess for me right now, the Texas teams look like the delightful landing spots. And of course, the primary home of one Derrick Henry. That's it. Yeah. The future home of one Derrick Henry, I like to call it, Baltimore.
Yep. And we've still got Baltimore as well, so that would be a fun one. And again, we're talking about how bad this incoming rookie running back class is, but if Dallas and Houston do forego signing a guy, or maybe even Baltimore, if they forego signing one of these veterans, whoever gets drafted to that team is the guy that we're immediately going to fall in love with in just about a month here. Now let's talk about the wide receivers. T. Higgins got his franchise tag. We thought, okay, well, T. Higgins is going back to Cincinnati for another year. But then the first news to break this morning before free agency legal tampering even opened was that T. Higgins is demanding a trade. I don't know. It seems like a tough year to demand a trade with how loaded this wide receiver class is. You figure the value for T. Higgins in a vacuum is probably somewhere around a first round pick, but who's going to give up a first round pick to pay T. Higgins $20+ million a year when you could simply just draft a wide receiver in the first round and get him on a rookie deal for the next 5?
That's 100% correct. I mean, I think, does anyone really see him as a true alpha wide receiver right now? Is he going to come in and change a team? I mean, I think the Chiefs would be like the team where you think maybe he could come in, but I was talking with Matt Waldman, our colleague, this morning. He thinks that's not like the ideal fit for him either. They need more of a Xavier Worthy, if you will, a new Tyreek Hill, whatever. So
Marquise Brown.
maybe even Marquise Brown. So I do think, asking for or demanding a trade is, only one step in the process. It includes actually being traded, and the end result is not always what you want. Obviously there's got to be some negotiations, and sometimes the public portion of negotiations, and by sometimes I mean every time, the public portions are way more contentious than the behind the scenes. So maybe this is just a hope to try to get a little public pressure on the team to do a little more in terms of working on a long-term contract. I think this is like, where does he have a better shot to win a Super Bowl? And maybe that's not all that important for him, but also something to think about, Mr. T. Higgins. I'm speaking to you, sir. The receiver market's about to be reset. Playing for 1 year on a $21 million deal and waiting for Justin Jefferson and your teammate to get his new Jamar Chase to get his new deal might yield some great financial results for you, young man. So think that through carefully.
And that's exactly where my head is. T. Higgins is still young. Like, he could have just, played this year and hit free agency next year at age 26. And realistically, like, he's not in a position where he should really be demanding these sorts of things with the injuries last year and the up and down play. I mean, he had that one spectacular catch, which may have been the catch of the year, where he stretched out for that touchdown. I mean, that was unbelievable, but I don't know if he's in a position where he can kind of be calling these shots right now. I think the best thing for him would have been kind of this franchise tag. He should have used that as sort of his prove it deal. Go out and play well this year, and then go demand the big contract in the trade. The only team I could see really interested in making a move for him right now, maybe the Panthers. Like, they're desperate for a wide receiver, and they don't have a first-round pick, so they could package a second and maybe a day 3 pick, or maybe they throw Brian Burns out there in trade negotiations. That
so do you see
like
T. Higgins? Do you see T. Higgins where you'd have to trade for him, or do you see Calvin Ridley where the price is obviously rising for him as a better, candidate for that role? That was my pre-free agency prediction, was Calvin Ridley to the Panthers. But either way, they have that hole. One of the things, that's like, we look at it from our through our fantasy manager lenses, and players are looking at it in a different way, obviously. But from where we sit, like, why would you just forego all the things that made you successful and put you in a position to make all this money? I get it, to make all this money, right? But there's a reason why you're in that position, and it's the supporting cast, it's the coaching staff, the scheme, your role in the scheme, and many things. It's a beautifully beautiful combination of things that make you what you are. And oftentimes, the grass being greener on the other side, you show up in the new place and it doesn't work out as well, says Kenny Galladay.
Yep. Let's not make the Kenny Galladay comments. I don't need
Okay,
that
Alvin Harper.
But, all right. Allen Robinson. We can keep going on and on and on. I actually just saw somebody recently, and I'm drawing a blank. I can't remember who shared it, but somebody showed that players who switch teams almost always see a drop in production the next year. Very rarely does a player switch team and become better. It's almost always the opposite, in fact. And, we talk about the grass always being greener. Other side of the coin, whatever you want to say, right after T. Higgins demanded his trade, moments after, we get news that Michael Pittman gets his extension. And this is kind of what the Bengals said they wanted to do with T. Higgins, right? They said, we're just going to use this franchise tag as a placeholder. And then something must have happened where contract negotiations stalled, whatever it may be. And the Colts said the same thing with Michael Pittman. This is just a placeholder. And it only took them a matter of days to give him a 3-year, $71.5 million contract, $46 million guaranteed. That keeps him there through age 29. They have Michael Pittman locked up for the majority of his career at this point. Now, this is weird because I saw somebody run a poll about this, and I actually ran the poll. I forgot. I said, do you expect Michael Pittman to score more or less points in 2024 than he did in 2023? And the vast majority of people said more points. Now, if you look at his splits from last year, he averaged less than half as many points with Anthony Richardson under center than he did with Gardner Minshew. His target share was significantly less as well. If you look at a whole, the team was passing less. Now, a lot of that could have just been having a brand new rookie that they were still trying to mold and get up to speed. But I got to be honest, I'm a little bit concerned here. I think that we saw the best from Michael Pittman last year when he gave us back-end wide receiver 1 numbers. I'm going to be looking at him as more of a back-end wide receiver 2 now with Anthony Richardson presumed to be the starter this year.
Let me help you with this one, Dave.
Please.
So my buddy Zach Kruger over at the Roto World, he has a stat that he threw out. To the 2 complete games played by Richardson in weeks 1 and 4, the Colts had a 64.4% pass rate in neutral game scripts. Like, it's a tiny sample size. But if you're looking to hang your hat on something, might be something like that. Like, also, like, I'm with Waldman on this one, on Richardson being a better passer. The Colts are with us on this as well. Like, the perception coming in. Also, guys come in with a perception that maybe they lack accuracy or whatever. It turns out they can get better. Josh Allen would like me to know this. If you remember, he couldn't hit the broadside of a barn when he was drafted.
He could not.
Now he hits the backside of somebody's shoulder from 50 yards away. So, I'm hoping for some great improvements. I'm banking on great improvement from Anthony Richardson, or at least, if not great improvement, him being better as a passer. I do think Pittman is a guy that, if he ended up being,
I want to say real quickly, he wasn't bad as a passer last year. It's just the volume was so small. They weren't letting him throw a lot, but when he did throw, he looked pretty darn good last year.
I'm just going with, like Chris Ballard talked a couple weeks ago, saying, hey, we see him as a passer. So look, he's going to run. He's a unique talent, and that's always going to be a limiting factor for some of the pieces around him, whether it's Jonathan Taylor, Michael Pittman, Josh Downs, whoever. But I do think that Pittman is in a good spot, and maybe he sees it as well. So I'm a little more bullish on Pittman in the world, I think.
All right. I'll take that into consideration next year. I mean, he's a great talent. Don't get me wrong. I love Michael Pittman. I might be overreading the tea leaves a little bit right here with Anthony Richardson.
Part of it is Richardson's the nail and I am his hammer.
Hey, nothing wrong with that. Also, since we're bouncing all over the place in today's free agency frenzy, earlier when we were talking about Josh Jacobs, we said a 3-year deal, unspecified amount, just came out. It is a 4-year, $48 million contract. So he got the bag. He's going to be there through, my math is right, I believe, through his age 30 season. So Josh Jacobs, longtime Green Bay Packer, as we'll see over the next almost half decade here. Still got a couple wide receivers to talk about. Tyler Lockett restructured his deal, 2-year, $34 million. I got to be honest, just a week ago on this exact show that you and I are on right now, I said I expected Tyler Lockett to get released, and I said wheels up for Jackson Smith and the Jigba. This isn't good. This is not good for Jack. There's no other way to split it, right? This is bad news for JSN.
JSN's still a very good player, and maybe it's not as great as news as Tyler Lockett leaving, but maybe Tyler Lockett sticking around, tailing off a little bit, and JSN ascending.
Just got some more news in. Gardner Minshew to the Raiders.
Does that make him a starter?
Yeah, I think so. And I think that means that there is no market left for Justin Fields, unfortunately. I mean, I don't know. That was Atlanta, Pittsburgh, Las Vegas. Those were the teams that we talked about. And
we saw the Athletic Zach Rosenblatt had a prediction that was traded to Cleveland as Deshaun Watson's backup. That's starting to look a little more realistic, I guess.
And you know what I've said is I think the best thing for Justin Fields, again, we are bouncing all over the place on this show today, Bob, but that's what makes it fun. Things are happening, right? But what I think makes the most sense for Justin Fields, go to Seattle, sit behind Geno Smith for a year. We saw Geno Smith, rough start to his career, got some time off, and then was able to bounce back in Seattle. I think that might be the best thing for him. Sit behind Geno Smith for a year, and then whether it's 2025 or 2026, then you can jump into a team with DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, Jackson Smith-Njigba, or do the same thing in New York. Sit behind Aaron Rodgers for a year. I'm just going to say it. I don't think Justin Fields is going to be a week one starter. I tweeted out a couple of weeks ago, got a ton of pushback, but trying to read the writing on the wall, I don't see many opportunities for Fields to be a week one starter.
I don't either. I think the opportunities you're talking about, I think even, how committed is Seattle to starting Geno Smith all year? I'd be looking at those options where maybe I could creep in this season, which maybe is Seattle. I think we saw maybe an opportunity for that. Maybe the New York Giants. I mean, they're married to Daniel Jones, but at some point,
but they can get Fields for cheap enough that it doesn't really matter. Yeah,
right. I mean, he's but you got to pick up the option at some point. That's the problem for him, right? I mean, do you take a chance with a rookie where you don't have to make that decision soon, or do you take a chance with him? I think all the things that you hear about him, talking to Hub Arkish from Pro Football Weekly a couple of weeks ago, he couldn't say enough great things about Fields, like just his off field, the way he handles himself, the way he studies, the way he works, the leadership abilities, all those things. And, but had to acknowledge that, he's not proven as a passer. I think that's going to be the issue that haunts him, being an unproven passer, and especially with this year's quarterback crop.
Yeah. And you look at it, I mean, the type of player that Gardner Minshew is, it's going to be very similar, just slightly better play than what they got last year from Aiden O'Connell. It's going to be a gunslinger. He's going to throw the ball all over the place. And they still have Devontae Adams. They still have Jacoby Myers. So, just totally spitballing here. I think Gardner Minshew, assuming he's the starter in Las Vegas, probably looking at him, in your two quarterback and super flex leagues as a top 15, top 18 quarterback next year.
Probably so. I feel like this is a sign that they're probably looking that they will draft a quarterback, though. They're what, 11? It's Vikings 11. Denver at 12, Raiders at 13. There was talk that maybe they'd want to move up. I'm looking at the money here. I mean, it's not what is it? I don't know. I like to think they would get a quarterback to develop, and maybe Minshew is the bridge for a couple of years. But we've seen how that works for players. If you get a nice opportunity, said Jared Goff, you might be able to run with it.
Yeah. All right, last little bit of news we got here for wide receivers, at least. Actually, we got two more to go. Jerry Jeudy traded to the Cleveland Browns. That happened a couple of days ago. Man, former first-round pick and traded away for a 5th and a 6th at just age 25. I'm going to put you on the spot. I don't know if you did your homework or not, Bob. When is the last time we've seen a wide receiver start his career very disappointing in the way that Jerry Jeudy has, get traded for pennies on the dollar, and then suddenly break out and become the player we always thought he'd be? Does it ever happen?
Was it Amari Cooper?
I mean, Amari Cooper wasn't bad. Amari Cooper was still good to start his career. He might not be the Amari Cooper we know now, but Amari Cooper was still good to start his career. We're gonna have to ask Adam Harstad to go through through all of the old seasons, but man, it just doesn't seem like something that happens often.
No,
I think this. I don't want to say it's the end of the road, but
I've totally not been keen on him during his time in Denver. Not been one of my guys, and maybe part of that is the failure to live up to expectations. The draft people loved him, and I just never saw what they saw. And I don't know that it's his fault or there's always a multivariable equation here. There's quarterback schemes, various things, but just never seemed to click for me. Now, my big concern for him is, does he now, put a cap on David Njoku, or more of a cap on David Njoku than Deshaun Watson, or the absence of Joe Flacco would be the better way to put that. So I still think Njoku's fairly priced at tight end 8. I don't think this changes this. I don't think it changes much for me. I'm looking at you look at the price range where Jeudy was going. I could end up if I ended up taking him in the 12th round, I could think of worse things. Not many, but some worse things. And so that's kind of how I view him. Kind of a similar, kind of like a lateral move for me.
Yeah. That's kind of where I'm at. Still going to be the Amari Cooper show. We got to hope David Njoku could build off of the finish that he had to the end of the year last year, but I'm not seeing much happening for Jerry Jeudy here. Now we kind of got a 2-for-1 that we'll talk about to close out the wide receivers here. Gabriel Davis signed with the Jaguars, 3 years, $39 million. How crazy is this? Gabriel Davis getting Saquon Barkley money. We're talking about how the running backs are the belle of the ball in this free agency class, but Gabe Davis is still pulling just as much money as the top running back is. Then we also just got news that they brought in Devin Duvernay as well. So Jaguars, it seemed like they did this 2 years ago. They had a really splashy offseason, bringing in Evan Ingram and Christian Kirk. And then last year they went out and they traded for Calvin Ridley. And now this year they're bringing in Gabe Davis and Devin Duvernay. It just seems like a constant retool in Jacksonville ever since they drafted Trevor Lawrence.
Yeah, see Scampers out in the chat breaking news left and right. He had that one dead to rights, and it crushes his guy Agnew. Sorry about that, Scampers.
That is disappointing. Or who's the other guy that broke out late in the season that everybody got really excited about? He had the one big game. Totally drawing a blank here.
No, I'm trying to. Yeah,
Parker Washington.
Parker Washington. I'm thinking Preston Williams. Same initials. Yeah, I like. So I mean, Gabe Davis is a great deep threat. He's a great downfield blocker. There are things to like about him. He's incredibly inconsistent. Fantasy managers will fear him. And do you think he's going to get, like Calvin Ridley we saw last year, get 130 plus targets? How much of that was due to the fact that there were so many injuries at the position? We also saw Evan Ingram get 114 targets. Do you think if everyone's healthy, everyone comes in a little lower, I think, except Christian Kirk, right? So I don't think this is like a horrible move. In general, it's probably cheaper than what it kind of suggests to me that Ridley wants a little more money. And so I'm not against this. I'm not like super excited about it. And Gabe Davis's lack of consistency is the thing that will keep his price depressed. Last year, what was 300-yard games and 5 games with 0 catches.
Yeah. And that's the thing, man. Gabe Davis, like he made $39 million today because he had a 4-touchdown game in the playoffs 3 years ago. And he has just hung his hat on that game ever since. I don't think he's a number 1 receiver. I don't think he's a number 2 receiver, but yeah, sure. He could stretch defenses vertically a little bit and open up some more of that underneath stuff for Christian Kirk and for Evan Ingram. Real quickly, we'll hit on some of these tight ends. We already talked about Jonnu Smith with the Dolphins. Zach Ertz signed with the Commanders. Hunter Henry returns to New England to play for the Patriots. Noah Fant is still the guy that's available out there. I don't know, man. There's I don't see a lot to get excited about with this tight end group.
I feel like I've here for this Gerald Everett slander, and I should defend my guy. But
no, I love Gerald Everett as well. I mean, he is a name. He is out there.
I think I put this in my notebook this week. And the top of the heap is Gerald Everett and Fant and Mike Gesicki, who I will never live down. I think that tells you a lot about the heap.
Yeah, it's I mean, there's a lot of tight ends out there, but every year, man, like if you don't have one of those elite guys, you've just got to cross your fingers and hope for the best. And maybe we see one of these guys finally break out. I was a big Mike Gesicki fan. I was a big Noah Fant fan. I've been a big Gerald Everett fan, but fool me once, shame on you. And I've been fooled year after year after year by these guys. So we'll see. We'll dive onto those when we get into our rankings and projections episodes a little bit later in the offseason. Let's wrap up the show. We got a few minutes left here talking about some kind of predictions, some guesses, what we think might happen. Here's a kind of thought-provoking question I have for you, and we may have already gotten the answer. I said, every year we're shocked by a handful of week 1 starters. Last year we had Sam Howell, Brock Purdy, Josh Dobbs, Desmond Ridder, and Baker Mayfield. Some shocking, maybe some not so shocking, but either way, I don't think anybody in March was talking about those guys being week 1 starters. In 2020, we had Jacoby Brissett, Davis Mills, Mitch Trubisky, Marcus Mariota, Joe Flacco, and Geno Smith. Who do you think is going to be one of these surprising week 1 starters this year? Maybe we just got our answer in Gardner Minshew.
I think definitely Minshew, but I think you could go ahead and throw Jacoby Brissett back in that mix with the team that drafted him in New England, right? I mean, seems like he would be like an ideal guy to carry you through until whoever that rookie is you pick. Jaden Daniels, if it's him, especially, seems like he needs a little time. So that would be the guy that I have an eye on. And who knows, maybe it's somebody else, but New England is the team, I think, where you're probably going to see that.
And there are already rumors with Kirk Cousins leaving Minnesota that Minnesota is interested in Sam Darnold. So Sam Darnold could be another guy to keep an eye on.
They're pushing that hard, and so like a little, when you're watching,
but maybe coming from Darnold's agent, perhaps?
Right? Well, they are, but when you're watching these reporters, really push something, it's not because they feel like they need to push something. It's because they want to look smart, right? And they want to be able to say they're right. So I feel like there's maybe a little something to that. He is an ideal fit. I still think like there's that stream. There are a handful of teams. I think Minnesota is definitely one where JJ McCarthy, the rookie, seems like would be a good fit for the scheme. But
he's a guy that might benefit from sitting for a year too.
And
so maybe Darnold is that
exactly.
bridge while they kind of prep McCarthy.
Yep. So I think that is a totally reasonable, kind of like if you're playing the speculation game, a guy like Darnold, especially just with the level of smoke that's being blown out there on this, there's got to be these people are hearing something almost certainly directly from the agent, and that's where a lot of the information comes from at this time of year.
Just throw it out there. Jameis Winston is still only 30 years old.
He
Not
is
ready to throw in the towel on Jameis Winston either.
Denver might need a starter. There's Cecil Lammy's been said since the combine that McCarthy is the apple of their eyes there as well, that he won't make it past 12 if he's there. So yeah, having a bridge for him and by the name of Jameis Winston would not be shocking at all.
All right, checking my notifications on Twitter one more time before we dive into these last few guys here to make sure nobody's signed, because we still have a few guys, some big names out there. Derrick Henry, Austin Eckler. These are the two dominoes still left to fall for the running backs. I mean, we just got to look at the ages at this point. 30 years old, Derrick Henry. Austin Eckler is about to turn 29 years old. Do you think that's really what it comes down to, is that people are just scared off by the age? We saw this last year with Leonard Fournette, where we thought Leonard Fournette was going to sign with a team and didn't sign until week 13 with Buffalo, and then was only active for 2 games for the rest of the season. It's crazy to say that's what's going to happen with Derrick Henry and Austin Eckler, right?
For Henry, for sure. I mean, I wonder how people view Eckler. Maybe they should be mindful of what we talked about a little earlier about the injury. I mean, he had a high ankle sprain to open the season. Was he ever at full speed? I don't know. But Derrick Henry, I saw more than glimpses of the guy that I've seen all along. And of course, the advertisements that he puts out on his social media in recent days suggest that he could still be that guy, man. Nobody
does a very strong man.
Nobody does a workout video like him. But I do think to me, he's the guy that I want to see land. And maybe there are talks ongoing and we'll get something before the end of the day. But I still think, watching him, the thing that seemed to be maybe dropping off a little bit is the breakaway speed, but it's still there. I mean, you still get a taste of it, and you wonder how much the lack of that or the diminishing of that has been a function of the offensive line play in Tennessee, which was, again, horrible. And how much of it was Henry. He needs a little bit of room to get through before he can.
I was going to say, he still has the breakaway speed. It just takes him an extra 2 or 3 steps to get to it.
Yeah, that seems reasonable. Yeah.
But Baltimore, you talked about it earlier, Baltimore and Henry being a great fit. And they need to do something, because Keaton Mitchell, little jitterbug at the end of the year that we got super excited about. He tore his ACL. He's probably not going to be ready week 1. J.K. Dobbins, injury aside, he's a free agent, so they might not bring him back. And now we just saw Gus Edwards leave and go to the Chargers. So as of right now, I don't even know who the guy is. I don't even know if there is a running back under contract in Baltimore right now. So they're going to have to do something. And then let's talk about these wide receivers real quickly. Calvin Ridley, we talked about him potentially signing with the Panthers. It doesn't seem like he's going back to Jacksonville after what we've seen there. But he could also be, maybe he wants to go land with the Chiefs or the Bills and do something fun and plug himself into a good offense. I really don't know what to expect from Calvin Ridley.
Those are the good offenses that are looking. There are other offenses. I mean, Baltimore seems to perennially be throwing darts at somebody or another. So, maybe there's something there. Will Arizona be looking for a veteran? There was talk of them interested, in, as we said, in Diontae Johnson. Maybe they'd be interested in somebody else as well, which would be a sign that they're moving on from Marquise Brown, who, we're going to talk about here, I'm sure. Some of these pieces make sense, but I think all of them would like to end up in the 2 teams you mentioned at the top. I mean, Kansas City and Buffalo, the chances to win the titles right there seem to be, and look, you could include Baltimore there. I don't know how seriously they'd be hunting though.
Now, I think all 3 of the The big three this year, I'm using that term very, very, very loosely when talking about wide receivers. Calvin Ridley, Marquise Brown, and I guess Darnell Mooney is probably in that bunch as well, maybe a step below. But they all do similar things when it comes to getting deep and having that long speed and stretching defenses vertically. And that just so happens to be exactly what both Kansas City and Buffalo are looking for. So that's kind of what I expect to see Marquise Brown. We saw it in the chat, or one of the questions in the chat earlier was, where do we expect Marquise Brown to sign? And I think Kansas City makes the most sense. He's coming off back-to-back years where he has suffered injuries and his production has been up and down. Go sign a one-year prove-it deal. Marquise Brown is still young. He can go sign a one-year prove-it deal and play with Kansas City, play with Buffalo, stay healthy for a year, be productive, and then he hits free agency as a 28-year-old who will be much more desirable than he is right now, and then he can get that big payday. Do you expect to see that happen, or do you think he's just going to take the best offer out there?
I think he'll take the best offer out there, but I would like to see it be one of those. I mean, that's the ideal outcome for him, is right. He does just get a nice 1-year deal, stays healthy for a full season. Like, there's something to be said, for his connection with Kyler Murray in Arizona. They're good friends. It hasn't translated to something to be said on the field as much as we'd like to see it. And I don't know how big a fit he is for the offense they're running right now. So yeah, I do expect to move on. I think part of the, the other part of the Bills thing is, do they know more about what's going on with him than we do in terms of Stephon Diggs? Like, what was the issue with him?
Matthew Berry said the rumor from the combine was that the Bills still have the utmost faith in Stephon Diggs being the wide receiver one. And
I keep saying, 4 years from now, we may look back and say, man, that little tiny blip on the radar of his career, it was it was tough, but he's still Stephon Diggs. So we don't know that. Maybe we'll get answers from that by who they start targeting here in free agency.
Now, again, we're just shooting off on tangents all over the place, but since we brought it up, the Buffalo Bills, my kind of take on Stephon Diggs, he still looked good last year. He was still getting open. There were a handful of times where he was open deep and Josh Allen missed him. What we saw, the big change in philosophy, was when they changed offensive coordinators, and then all of a sudden James Cook and Dalton Kincaid became the offensive focal points. I don't think Stephon Diggs is washed. I think it was just a different offensive scheme that didn't benefit Stephon Diggs as much. But on that note, Bob, I think we've covered everything we possibly can today. I mean, there's still news rolling in. You and I could shoot for 4 hours today and just keep going and going and going, but we got to call a wrap to the show at some point today. Go ahead and let everyone know. You're the new guy over at Football Guys, as we like to joke around. Let everyone know where they can find you, what you're working on. I know you're in the middle of writing an article right now as we are recording, staying busy.
Right, we're doing all the instant reactions. I'm doing a handful of those on all the moves today. I'm in the middle of a Josh Jacobs, but you can see the weekly notebook, fantasy notebook, put it out Sunday night, and it's available Monday, and kind of just a kind of in-depth, roundabout look at the things that are going on, and values I see, and things like that. And you can catch me here on the XF Football Diehards, Football Diehard, and also on the Football Diehards radio show on Sirius XM Fantasy Sports Radio every Saturday afternoon at 3 p.m., where you'll often find Dave Kluge joining me because he's super smart.
Yeah, those are always fun shows to join. But be sure to check out those articles Bob has been cranking out, because they hit everything. They're digestible, easy to read. They give you everything you need to know for fantasy football, who's moving up, who's moving down, give you the information on the contracts and all that good stuff, as well as a little peek behind the curtain. Bob, you've been pulling out some of the conversations we have in our internal chats here at Football Guys and adding those to the articles. So really, really good stuff.
Great resource, by the way. Great resource, having this fantastic staff of like seasoned fantasy veterans out there who are in the middle of chats on our private channels, and I can take advantage of all that. Yeah, nothing better. It really is like a real time, let's sort these things out. We do it here. We did it a little bit here, but that's the real fun of this, is when you're doing things in real time, trying to get immediate values out to people, and you have a whole crew of folks who know what the hell they're talking about.
We talked about doing it last year, where we were just going to publish everything in that free agency thread. What do you think? We're up to 500 or 600 messages or something right now, where we've got over 90 staffers that are just consistently giving their, on the fly takes and immediate reactions. It is some good, fun, high level football discussion, but Bob, we got to get back to it. Work needs to be done. Articles need to be written. We got a lot to do. Appreciate you so much for making the time today. I will be back next Monday, with Alfredo Brown when he returns from assignment. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you next week.